So this is going to be an in-depth analysis of why I think Casemiro is one of the, if not the best central midfielders in world football at the moment. And towards the end of the video, I'm also going to be suggesting 3 other younger central midfielders who United could sign in the summer to be backups to Casemiro, but also long-term replacements for him in the future. And if you like this video, you'll probably like the analysis video I did of Lisandro Martinez, where I do an in-depth analysis of why I think he could be the best centre-back in world football at the moment. That video will be linked in the description and in the eye above. But before I go any further, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video, OneFootball, which has become my favourite football app because it has everything you need to keep up to date with the latest news and transfers, providing you with articles to read as well as videos to watch, whilst also being excellent for keeping up to date with all the matches from across the world that are going on, providing a live ticker as well as match ratings and statistics, whilst also allowing you to check your team stats from across the whole season. If you're sick of having to use Google and Twitter to search for news and stats that you want to see, then the OneFootball app is definitely the app for you, so I'll leave it linked in the description below, and by downloading the app you will be helping to support the channel. So I think it's well established now that Casemiro isn't just a defensive midfielder. However, as a defensive midfielder as a whole, I think there's a case to be made that he's not just the best in the world at the moment, but maybe the best of all time. And before I get into the full analysis, I think it's best if we just come across to his FB Ref report and look at his defensive ability from a pure statistical point of view. Over the past 365 days, when compared against every other central midfielder in Europe's top 5 leagues, Casemiro ranks in the 82nd percentile for the amount of tackles he's won, the 98th percentile for the amount of tackles he's winning in the defensive third, the 72nd for the tackles in the middle third, and the 40th for the tackles in the attacking third. He ranks close to the 90th percentile for the amount of dribblers he's tackled and the amount of dribblers he's challenged, whilst also sitting in the 62nd percentile for the percentage of dribblers he's tackled, with a fairly impressive rate of 50%. Now these metrics are impressive on their own, but once you factor in that Casemiro has been playing for possession dominant sides like Manchester United and Real Madrid, the sheer volume of tackles he's able to put in becomes even more outstanding. He also ranks in the 99th percentile for blocks, ranking incredibly highly for both shots and passes blocked, and he also ranks in the 88th percentile for his interceptions, showing his ability to read the game, as well as the 99th percentile for clearances. And he also ranks in the 71st percentile for the amount of errors he's made, which doesn't seem as impressive as the other metrics until you realise that he's made a total of 0 errors, showing that not only is Casemiro an absolute monster in terms of the sheer volume of defensive actions he's able to put in, but he's also a player that's incredibly reliable as well. But the obvious parts of Casemiro's game, such as his blocks and tackles, are the things that can be measured statistically, but there are a lot of things that are quite intangible, such as his leadership, which allows him to command the midfield, which is essential in offering organisation, particularly from a defensive point of view, as if you watch Manchester United over the past few seasons, they didn't have that Roy Keane-like figure to really keep the structure of the midfield, and especially when you have players like Fred and McTominay in that area, who I wouldn't say have the highest football intelligence, you need a player like Casemiro to keep everything together. And if you watch Casemiro in isolation when the opposition has a ball, you'll see that his reading of the game allows him to be just a step ahead of everyone else, and enables him to position himself in a way that cuts off passing lanes into opposition players in advanced positions, preventing passes before they're even made. Casemiro's so much more efficient in possession than either Fred, McTominay or even Nemanja Matic before. When watching United last season, I felt that all of these 3 players seem to just take too long in possession, which allows the opposition to shuttle across and close off spaces, whereas because of Casemiro's football intelligence and reading of the game, able to get the ball under control quicker and using quick, short and one-touch passes to move the attack forward quickly, which whilst aren't as eye-catching as those long raking passes or through balls in behind the back line that we see from maybe someone like Christian Eriksen, are still highly essential to the fluidity of the whole attack. When Fred and Casemiro play in central midfield together, I think this comparison is pretty stark, and you can really see the difference between a player who's able to shift the ball quickly and a player in Fred who just can't do it to the same level. It just takes Fred an extra second to get the ball under control, he's not as composed under pressure or aware of players around him, which often leads to him panicking and choosing the wrong pass. Whereas I just feel so much more confident when the ball is with Casemiro. And I think this definitely stems from his time at Real Madrid, where he understood that he wasn't the best creative passer in that Real Madrid midfield, and so rather than trying to force passes, which a lot of players do in the modern game, he understood that it was better for the progression of the attack if he moved the ball on quickly and effectively facilitating Kroos and Modric's creativity. But the thing that separates Casemiro from other so-called defensive midfielders, or what I like to call ball-winner midfielders, such as maybe Kane or Ndidi, is that Casemiro is also exceptional in possession. Now, when he first arrived at Manchester United, I don't think everyone realised how good Casemiro actually was, and I do think that's because he was playing alongside Kroos and Modric, and because obviously these are two of the most creative central midfielders in football history, it made sense for him to adapt his game in order to get the best out of those two. And this obviously came in the form of playing more simpler passes in order to keep possession circulating, and leaving the penetrative, incisive, long and creative passing to Kroos and Modric, who I think everyone would agree are not just better than Casemiro at all of those things, but probably better than any other central midfielder in world football. However, coming into Manchester United, Casemiro's taken on the role of a creative passer as well, and really become a complete central midfielder. He's got the ability to sit in front of United's back two or back three in possession, in that space between the opposition's front and midfield lines, and he can receive the ball with his back to goal. And even though I would say that his overall press resistance is a part of his game that he could probably improve, he's still more than capable of receiving the ball under pressure and bouncing it out quickly, which is exactly what Ten Hag needs from a player in that position. I do think players like Busquets and Rodri are probably better at doing this, just having greater awareness in these positions, but I still think overall Casemiro is the better player, as neither Busquets or Rodri can match what Casemiro offers out of possession. But if you compare what Ten Hag and Ranić and Solskjaer had to deal with in this position from players like Matic, McTominay and Fred, it's a massive contrast, and compared to most defensive midfielders, such as Declan Rice, Kane and Ndidi, Casemiro is much better suited to playing this kind of regista role, particularly in a side that look to build out under pressure. But I do think Casemiro's better when he's receiving the ball facing goal, such as when he drops into one of the wide positions in the back three, which is what I like to refer to as the quarterback role. Because from this position, when United have established possession in the middle third, like Lisandro Martinez on the left side, which I did speak about in that analysis video of him, I'll leave it linked below for you to check out after this video, Casemiro has the passing range to receive the ball and drive a pass across the pitch to switch play, or find an incisive pass into one of the players between the lines, which, as you know from multiple of my Manchester United match analysis videos, which I'll link in a playlist in the description, is a massive part of Ten Hag's ball progression approach, looking to stretch the pitch and have players like Bruno Fernandes, Jadon Sancho and Weghorst dropping off from the forward line and looking to receive the ball in between the lines of the opposition system and linking the play that way. And so you need players like Casemiro and Lisandro Martinez who have the technical ability and vision to play those sorts of passes. When we look at his passing metrics in his FB Ref report, the first thing we can see is that he does obviously complete a high volume of short, medium and long passes, but his completion rate for his short and medium passes are probably lower than you would expect. And just from watching Casemiro, I would say this is more down to him trying riskier forward passes, looking to move the attack forward quickly, rather than him having an inability to circulate possession efficiently. He ranks in the 70th percentile for his XG assisted, the 76th percentile for his passes into the final third, the 65th for his passes into the penalty area, and the 63rd for his overall progressive passes. And so you can see that Casemiro certainly isn't at the level of someone like Christian Eriksen, Mateo Kovacic or even Rodri when it comes to progressing the ball forward via his passing from deeper areas, but once you combine it with his overall defensive ability, you can start to see just how complete a central midfielder he is. And like I said at the start of the video, I think Casemiro is as integral to this Ten Hag United side as Roy Keane was to Sir Alex Ferguson's side in the late 90s, early 2000s. Both players are central midfielders who you'd probably first regard as defensive-minded midfielders, players who could win the ball in the centre of the pitch, who had that tenacity and aggression. But as they progressed into their late 20s, early 30s, they also incorporated on-the-ball ability, being excellent passers of the ball, and like Roy Keane back in the late 90s, we are now seeing Casemiro add the ability to pop up and score important goals to his game as well, with his equaliser against Chelsea earlier on in the season, and his opener in the Carabao Cup final being perfect examples. The only issue he poses for Ten Hag is how do United replace Casemiro? And I don't just mean in the long term, which obviously United have to have an eye on with him turning 31 in February. I still think he's got another 3 or even 4 seasons left at the top. Just look at players like Fernandinho, Luka Modric, Toni Kroos, Pirlo, Michael Carrick and Paul Scholes for example, but I'm more talking about how they replace Casemiro when he's absent for whatever reason, be it suspension, injury or just needing to rest him. Because we've seen over the last few weeks with his absence that United's central midfield is nowhere near as effective both in and out of possession when he's not there. And so I definitely think that Ten Hag could do with a central midfielder being brought in the summer who can fill the void when Casemiro isn't there, at least to a better extent than either Fred or McTominay. And so I thought I'd briefly analyse a few suggestions. The first player who I think is the closest to Casemiro stylistically and has the potential to actually become world class is Moses Caicedo. He's an absolutely fantastic tackler, able to go to ground and win possession immaculately, and he has the same sort of ball winning ability that we see from players like Casemiro and Kane, almost a magnet to the ball in the centre of the pitch. I mean, just by looking at the defensive metrics in his FB Ref report pretty much says everything. He ranks in the 80th percentile or above for all the important defensive metrics. But like Casemiro, he's so much more than just a defensive midfielder. He ranks in the 97th percentile for his long pass completion with a rate of 81.7%, which is absolutely outstanding. And he also ranks very high for his short passing metrics and fairly high for his medium passing metrics as well. Obviously, his creative and progressive passing isn't anywhere near as good as his defensive play, but that is as expected. But he's still ranking fairly competently, ranking in the 72nd percentile for his passes into the penalty area, the 52nd for his passes into the final third, 57th for key passes, and 60th for his overall progressive passes as well. I would like to see him add more progressive carries to his game, as I think that natural power and athleticism that he has could really be put to use in a similar way to how Declan Rice does. And once you factor in that he's also just 21 years old, it becomes obvious to me at least that if you did want one player to replace Casemiro in the long term, it would be Caicedo. However, the issue I have with Caicedo is the same issue that I have with Five Guys restaurant. I like a burger as much as the next man, and I think Five Guys burgers are probably the best out there, or at least look the best I would say, but there's no way on God's earth I'm going to pay 10 quid for a burger. The same way there's no way I'm going to be paying £100 million for what is effectively a ball-winning central midfielder who could, yes, be one of the best central midfielders in world football, and probably is worth around 60, maybe even £70 million, but I just can't see a way that any club in world football can justify paying the fee that Brighton are going to demand, and so effectively Caicedo's been priced out of the market. However, a player who would definitely be better value for money would be Real Sociedad's 26-year-old Spaniard Mikel Merino. Some of you will remember Merino from his time at Newcastle back in 2017-2018, but he's progressed massively since then. He's got a tall, slender build, being 6'2" in height, but like Casemiro, he's an all-round central midfielder. He's definitely not as good as Casemiro or Caicedo in terms of his tackling ability, but he's still incredibly industrious and defensively astute in the centre of the park, and this can be seen as he ranks in the mid-80s to low 90s for his overall tackles won, his tackles in the middle third, and his tackles in the attacking third, whilst also ranking in the mid to high 70s and early 80s for his dribblers tackled, dribblers challenged, and percentage of dribblers tackled as well. He's not producing as many interceptions, but they're still fairly good as well, and so Merino, like Casemiro, is definitely the type of central midfielder who could operate in a midfield three as the sole ball-winning central midfielder, and is definitely capable of playing that deep single pivot position. And I think it's natural that as he progresses throughout his career, he'll move backwards, playing more as a regista. In terms of his passing, his numbers are kind of skewed because he plays in a Real Sociedad side that prioritise moving the ball forward quickly through the centre of the pitch, and so his short passing accuracy and his medium passing accuracy, as well as his long passing accuracy as well, does suffer. But when you look at his creative passing, you can see just how effective he is at progressing the ball forward, ranking in the 72nd percentile for his passes into the final third and the 84th for his passes into the penalty area, whilst also ranking in the 69th for his overall progressive passes, as well as ranking in the 86th for his XG assisted, the 78th for his expected assists, and the 76th for his key passes, whilst also ranking in the 89th percentile for his through balls. And so we can see that unlike maybe Caicedo, who's definitely a defensive player first, but also has very good long passing range from deeper positions, Merino is definitely more of a creative force going forward, but he has the defensive attributes that can make him an all-round central midfielder, and so I definitely think that he's a player that is stylistically similar to Casemiro, and being only in his early 20s and only having a contract until 2025, meaning he will likely be available in the summer for around £40 million, does make him an enticing option for United, particularly as a Fred upgrade. My final option as a backup but a long-term replacement to Casemiro is Kone of Borussia Mönchengladbach. Like Caicedo, Kone is in his early 20s, 21, 22 in May, but unlike the Gladbach man, he would be substantially cheaper, having a contract with Gladbach until 2025, and there are rumours that Borussia Mönchengladbach would be willing to accept a fee in the region of £30 million, which I think would be an absolute steal for a player of Kone's quality. Despite not ranking as highly as Caicedo and Merino in terms of the sheer volume of tackles he's making, ranking only in the 51st percentile for the amount of dribblers he's tackled, this is more down to the system of play he's deployed in rather than his ability, as he only ranks in the 17th percentile for the amount of dribblers dribblers he's challenging, but ranks in the low to mid 90th percentiles for both his percentage of dribblers he's tackled and the amount of challenges he's lost, showing us that whilst at the moment in the Gladbach midfield he isn't a high volume tackler, when he does make tackles he's very good at completing them. And this is because he's got wonderful tackling technique, whether this is a standing challenge pushing up to apply pressure, or a sliding tackle when using his athleticism and power to track back and stop the attack. But the best feature of Kone's game is both his press resistance and his ball carrying, as he ranks in the 99th percentile for the amount of successful take-ons he's completed, as well as ranking highly for his other take-on and progressive carrying metrics. He's fairly decent in terms of his short and medium passing, but he's nowhere near as good as Caicedo or Merino in terms of his progressive passing from deep. But that is a trade-off you make, whereas Merino's definitely more of a creative passer, Caicedo being a very good circulator of the ball and able to switch play with long passes. Kone instead has the best ability to drive with the ball through the centre of the pitch, and so it really comes down to a stylistic debate of what you want your ball-winning central midfielder to offer when you have possession. In terms of who's the most stylistically similar to Casemiro, I'd have to go with Kone, so if I was going to replace him with anyone, or really long-term replacement should I say, and a backup in the short term, it definitely would be Kone, not just for his age profile and price, but also for that ability to drive the attack forward with the ball at his feet. So thank you for watching. If you liked that video, check out some of my others which will be linked in playlists in the description below. Subscribe to the channel and make sure you click the bell so you get notified when my videos come out. Put your thoughts in the comment section and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for more content as well.